My name is Andrew Ingberson, and welcome to the premiere episode of my racing podcast, Racing English. Today, we are going to be talking about IndyCar, Formula One, NASCAR, and Pirelli World Challenge. And later in the episode, we have an interview with Porsche factory driver Pat Long. Pat Long is one of the most successful North American race car drivers. He's currently the only American Porsche factory driver. He is a three-time American Le Mans Series champion, and also a two-time 24 Hours of Le Mans winner, and also a Pirelli World Challenge champion, and he was generous enough to take time out of his busy day to sit down and talk with me. The first thing on the agenda is IndyCar. Their season kicks off this weekend at St. Petersburg, and as far as preseason testing indicates, looks like it's going to be pretty much wide open. The two favorites as far as teams go, Penske and Ganassi, look like they're going to be on top just like last year. There's three guys who stood out last year to me, and I think they're going to be exactly the same. I'm talking about Will Power, Juan Pablo Montoya, and Scott Dixon. If I had to put my money on who was going to win, I'd go for Scott Dixon, because as opposed to JPM and Will Power, Dixon has the whole Ganassi team behind him. He is effectively the number one driver, whereas JPM and Will Power, since Juan Pablo arrived at the team, they've been fighting each other for control of the team. It came to a head last year when Juan Pablo pretty much had control of the championship in the last race, and he and Will Power came together in the final race, and that cost Juan Pablo the championship. So I'm expecting those guys to really be going at it this year. I think the Penske car is definitely going to be faster than the Ganassi car, but I think the Penske car is they're going to be taking points away from each other and opening the door for Dixon and possibly some other people that are not obvious favorites might be able to steal the championship. The one thing I'll be watching for is if Andretti Autosport can make a comeback. They really didn't run very well last year on the road and street courses. They had some solid runs on ovals, got one or two wins, but they really struggled, especially with the new Honda Aero package. So we're looking to see if Honda can recover, and also they have a new driver. I'm thinking it could be the wild card this weekend, Alexander Rossi. After his F1 career petered out a few weeks ago, he was still in the running for the seat, but he lost it to Rio Haryanto because of his government funding. So Rossi has come back to the States. He's gonna be very fast. We know that. He was very good in the F1 races he ran, and he was runner-up in GP2 last year. So Rossi, it'll be interesting to see how he adapts to the heavier car. But initial signs from preseason testing, he should be right on the money. From what I heard, he was on the pace immediately, and he could be one to steal the show. Next, Formula One. The first race is on March 20th, and they completed their last preseason test last weekend. So it looks like initial signs looks like Mercedes is still bulletproof on their reliability. The car ran pretty much without issues. I know they broke down on the last day, but wouldn't be concerned about it. They ran hundreds of laps more than anyone else. But it looks like, if anything, Ferrari really has stepped up their game. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to challenge Mercedes on a weekly basis, but I think the gap's going to be closer. Like, for example, last year, they were only really able to challenge Mercedes on the weird weekends. They won in Malaysia when it was like 105 degrees, and they won in Singapore, which was on a really bumpy street course, and then they won in Budapest, which that race, the Mercedes crashed into a bunch of cars and had a bunch of mistakes, and that opened the door for Ferrari to take advantage. Preseason testing looks like the car's fast. They've definitely closed the gap. It's a radically different car, especially with the nose. So, we won't really know because everyone has their own agenda in preseason testing. It's difficult to know who's running what fuel level and what setup they're running, how aggressive. But it looks like it's going to be close. I'd put my money on Mercedes, specifically Lewis Hamilton. He's in his prime right now, and he's going to be tough to beat. But I think if anybody's going to beat him, Vettel and Ferrari are certainly going to be right there. Also, from preseason testing, looks like Renault, their highly publicized return to Formula One, looks like it might be a rough year, couple of years, because they came back after the end of last year the team they took over, Lotus, had a solid season, not great. They had a podium. They were running in the points consistently, but they had a Mercedes engine in the back, which is obviously the best one to have at the moment. And with the Renault takeover, they've switched back to the Renault engine, so they're gonna be down on horsepower. The car's not really. It's going to be less reliable, and it shows in preseason testing. The Renault, especially early on, it really struggled to complete laps. I think in the first 2 or 3 days of testing, it logged the fewest laps of anybody. But towards the end, they were able to get the car running, and even then, the pace didn't look that great. One of the biggest surprise I think of off-season testing is the new Haas team. The new American Formula One team that is joining they're joining this season. The car ran well. It didn't run perfectly, but it ran really well for a brand new team. And also, once they got running, it showed decent pace as well. I expect it to be a midfield car and be challenging for points, especially with the Ferrari really appear to have helped it. It actually, to me, it looks a lot like last year's Ferrari, which was obviously no slouch. I expect it to. It'll be a midfield pack. It'll be a midfield car. I anticipate it to be able to challenge the Sauber as kind of Ferrari's development team, and they have a very strong driver lineup. So I anticipate them doing well. Another thing which surprised me is Manor. Manor have been basically bottom of the barrel for the last few years, and with their agreement with Mercedes, they have a Mercedes engine. They have a Williams gearbox. I anticipate them being a midfield car, challenging for points. They ran well over the off-season. They didn't have that many mechanical issues, and they had much better pace than they've shown the last few years. So, and also they have a pretty stellar driver lineup. They have they have last season's DTM champion Pascal Wehrlein as part of a deal with Mercedes. He's going to race with them. He's one of the top young drivers at the moment. I expect him to run well. And also they have Rio Haryanto. He is a pay driver in the Indonesian government. I believe the figure was $15 million. They've paid the team for him to race in F1. He ran well in GP2. He won a few races, but he's yet to prove himself as a heavy hitter and a contender week in, week out. And he'll definitely be looking to prove himself against Pascal Wehrlein. Also, in off-season testing, we saw the debut of the Halo. Ferrari ran this on a few installation laps just to test the visibility of it. It's basically a ring around the driver's head designed to deflect debris, because there have been a lot of incidents lately of drivers getting hit in the head with debris, and that's been the main safety issue of the past few years. This offers at least a temporary solution until they can figure out the way forward. The thing is, though, there's a lot of split opinions. There's a lot of the experienced drivers like it because probably most of the experienced drivers have had friends killed in race cars, and they want it to be as safe as possible. Whereas most of the young drivers are not as experienced. They want it to stay pure and open wheel, and also the Halo doesn't look as good. So I think that's the main concern. But especially Nico Hülkenberg was advocating against it. He wants the cars to stay open top. I anticipate it becoming mandatory in 2017, and then over the next few years we're probably going to see a full canopy, because this is going to be it seems like this is going to be the next safety innovation, which is going to come in the next few years, because since after Senna's death in '94, there's been a lot of work to slow the cars down, and that has gotten the job done for the most part. But especially in recent years, there's been, I think, off the top of my head, Henry Surtees was killed in the Formula 2 crash when a tire hit him in the head. Dan Weldon was killed in the IndyCar crash when he was launched into a catch fence head first. And Jules Bianchi hit a tractor, and his resulting head injury was fatal. And then just last year, Justin Wilson was killed when a section of a nose cone hit him in the head at Pocono. So I think this is going to be the next big safety innovation in the next few years, and it's going to save a lot of drivers. And just recently, in fact, 2 or 3 days ago, it was announced that there'll be increased radio restrictions for for Formula One. So my understanding is basically the F1 drivers are pretty much going to be on their own. The team's going to be allowed to tell them about hazards on the racetrack. They're going to be told if there's oil on the track or a stopped car. But for the most part, they're going to be on their own, to the point of even deciding when and where to pit, what tires they want, what settings to have the car on for fuel conservation and speed, that sort of thing. Yeah, this a lot of people are saying this is going to open up the door for mistakes and make it a lot more unpredictable because the drivers are already overloaded as is. Now they're being asked to process a bunch of information. Toto Wolff, the boss of Mercedes, actually said he thinks Nico Rosberg's going to benefit from this rule most because he's very involved with the car and he knows what's going on, whereas Lewis Hamilton's more of a wheelman. He mostly drives the car and lets the team do most of that stuff. So it'll be definitely interesting to see if it has any impact on the competition. I expect it to early on, but once we get a few races under our belt, they'll get a feel for it. Next, last weekend, NASCAR raced at Las Vegas. Brad Keselowski won the race with a late race pass on Kyle Busch, which surprised me because he didn't run. He ran well. He was in the top 5 most of the race, but he didn't establish himself as the dominant car. But after this win, because he was definitely the fastest right at the end, after this win, I think he might be the guy to beat, at least on the 1.5 mile tracks, because when I was at the Texas Motor Speedway race last year, and that was a 1.5 mile. He didn't win that race, but he led 300 of 330 laps. So that car was very good, very dominant. The crew chief had it dialed in. It just didn't work. The car just wasn't dialed in right at the end. So I think and also one of the interesting stats is it seems like he's a very on and off driver. Like 2012, he had a great year. 2013, he had a very poor year. He only won 1 race. 2014, he didn't win a championship, but he won a bunch of races. And then last year, he had kind of an off year. He only won 1 race. So if the trends continue, this year should be one for him to win a lot of races and contend for a championship. One of the things I noticed at the race was the strong run of Austin Dillon. That car was very good. They had a slow pit stop earlier in the race, which set him back, and then Austin sped on pit road, and that set him back. And then about halfway through the race, he'd worked his way pretty much back through the field. And then he got caught speeding again, and then they made a strategy call late, which got him into 5th place right at the end. Which he hasn't ran this well in a while. This is certainly a good sign for the future for him. He's a fast driver. He seems like he's not a very mentally tough driver. He gets flustered very easily, and I think that's just going to come with experience. So that was definitely a good sign for him, and also the Richie Childress Racing group. They didn't have a very good year last year, and already this year the cars are running better. Newman ran very well last week, and Austin Dillon put in what I think is the strongest run of his career last week. And for the second week in a row, Kyle Larson had a very poor run. He was running outside the top 20, and in both races he was caught up in incidents. I don't know, Kyle Larson, he's fast, but obviously what they're doing right now is not working. He had a great year in his debut season, 2014. He was the next big thing. I don't know what it is, but something's not clicking. He's not running as well as he should. He's not winning races. If he was gonna win the race, like whatever he's doing now, if it was gonna work, it would have worked by now. He's in his 3rd season. He's as fast as anybody. If I were him, I think I'd be thinking about switching teams pretty soon because clearly the Ganassi car is not up to standard, and he needs something he needs something to fire him up. I think a new team would get him going, and he could finally reach his potential because he's pretty much been one of the guys to beat in the Xfinity series. Whenever he runs those races, he runs very well. It's just he's not been doing well on Sunday. Chase Elliott has crashed out for the second time in 3 races. This was his strongest run of the year. He was running right around the top 5 the whole race, and then got caught up in a crash. I think he's starting to feel the pressure because he spun out in the Daytona 500 all on his own, And in this one, he probably could have avoided the incident, but he tried to blast through, and he was caught up in a crash. And if he's got the speed. It's just he hasn't really shown what he's capable of in a Cup car. He keeps getting involved in incidents, and I think he just needs a few good runs, and he'll be able to get some momentum going, and that'll help him out. So, and also, Jimmy Johnson, I think the two contenders I've seen this year, Jimmy Johnson won the last race, and he led a bunch. This is his first dominant run he's had for a while. He led a bunch of laps on Sunday, and I think it could be a good omen for the future. I think he and Brad Keselowski are the guys to beat at the moment, because Kevin Harvick, he surprised everybody. He was struggling to hang inside the top 10 even after leading all those laps at Atlanta. So I think Jimmy Johnson's back to his best after an off year last year. He won a bunch of races, but he didn't perform when it mattered. And it looks like he's definitely the lead Hendrick car. It seems like Elliott has been able to hang with him on pace, but he keeps crashing out. And Casey Kane, Dale Earnhardt Jr., he's struggling at the moment. He's having okay runs. He's still the guy to beat on the plate races, but he's just week in, week out, he's not where he needs to be. And then Casey Kane's not even in the same zip code. Whatever they're doing is really not working. I don't know. I don't want to put the blame on Casey because he's a fast driver, but the team and the car is just not working. They need to reshuffle that very soon because they are really behind the power curve. And last weekend was the first round of the Pirelli World Challenge. At Circuit of the Americas. I was in attendance for this race. It was a very good race. In the GT classes, the two guys who over the off season and have isolated themselves as the favorites were Patrick Long and Johnny O'Connell. These two, Johnny O'Connell's the defending is won the last 4 championships in a row, and Pat Long was the last guy to beat Johnny O'Connell in the championship, and this is his returning season, and he came out with a bang, qualifying on the pole and winning the first race. But he was involved in an incident on the first, and he didn't even make it to the first corner of the second race before he was taken out. So that'll be fun. That'll be something to watch. Is him coming back and making a recovery in this championship. I think that the Cadillacs established themselves as his main challenger. I believe Michael Cooper's in the lead of the championship because he finished third and second on those 2 races, and he's the defending GTS champion, and I think he's establishing himself as a guy who can challenge Johnny O'Connell. So the next race is in St. Pete. This is obviously a street course. I'd expect Pat Long's the guy to beat. He was flying at COTA, and also it's a tight street course. I expect the 911 because it looked like probably the more agile car there. I anticipate him being the guy to beat, and the guys who are going to be chasing him down are going to be J.D. Davison and Brian Heitkotter in the Nissan GTRs. Those were the guys who were the closest on pace challenging him. I think the Cadillacs were more consistent, so that's how they came out on top. So I think Pat Long, with effort racing, getting the new 911, they're gonna be very tough to beat. Not just Pat Long, but also his teammate Michael Lewis. He showed solid top 5 speed at COTA, and I anticipate him being there. I anticipate him being just as fast. But then again, there's going to be a lot of guys who I'm not mentioning because the PWC is as competitive as it's ever been. There's really good. It's competitive to the point of being a crapshoot. There's so many guys who could realistically win. There's a lot of the competition is close. There's performance balance to keep it all close together. It looks like pretty much anybody who's running the top 10 could win at some point in the season. And then also the GTS class, they have new regulations that allow the European GT4 cars. Those debuted, and they were very fast at COTA, despite I was expecting the older cars to do well at COTA with the long straights, the Camaros, the Mustangs, etc. But I think the KTM Expo, that showed very good pace, qualifying on the pole, and it's going to be tough to beat, especially on the street courses. And also the Ginetta, that showed really good pace. It's a fast car. It could obviously roll speed through the corners a lot faster than the Mustangs. So I'm anticipating that car being in contention for podiums week in, week out. And then the TCB cars, it was the TC classes. It was standard. It was anybody who was in the top 10 could have won. It was a very competitive race. It looks like in TC, it's going to be mostly the BMWs are going to be leading the way. Those cars were very fast. It was their North American debut for those cars. They ran very well. And TCA looks like it's going to be MX-5s versus Kia. There's one Kia that is a clear horsepower advantage, and it was able to, if it could get out front, it could control the pace through the corners and then leave the MX-5s on the straights. But the MX-5s ran really well, and the championship battle in TCA is going to be really something to watch. And in TCB, it was just whoever got the lucky break at the end won. It was just a pack of cars all passing each other. I think it was. And it's going to be like that for the rest of the season, especially at Road America, where they can draft each other. And also, while I was there, I was lucky enough to interview Pat Long, Porsche factory driver, and he was the race winner on race 1, racing at the number 31 911 Porsche 911 for Effort Racing. Welcome back to Racing English. I'm with Porsche factory driver and today's winner, Patrick Long. Great job on the win today. You've been doing a lot of endurance racing over the past few years, and today was your return to the Pirelli World Challenge. What did you have to do differently in the sprint race as opposed to the endurance racing?
Well, right off the get-go, going down into turn 1, it's always difficult here at Austin, and it was clear to me that some of these guys knew that with ABS in the current GT3 format, you can really launch the car in there deep. So I'll be more on my game tomorrow on the start and get my elbows up a little bit more, but past that, we push the cars just as hard in endurance racing as we did today in the sprint racing format. There's a few different rules that I had to get back up to speed and do my studying and talk to the race stewards, but overall the job remains the same, and that is to get every bit out of the tire, every bit out of the car, but not to abuse your equipment.
It seemed like, I was watching the race, it seemed like for majority of the race, Highcutter and you were running about the same pace, and then once you closed in, once you got by, you were able to pull away. Were you hanging back just waiting to make a good move, or did his car fade, or your car came in right at the end?
Well, I had a couple things on my mind. The first thing was to try and make a break from 3rd and 4th place, because when you start dicing for the lead, you kind of invite the 3rd and 4th place cars into the party. So I wanted to get away from them. I saw that we had a little more pace than they did, so I had to bide my time a little bit there. But I also knew over one lap that I didn't have the legs on Highcutter, so I needed to wait till it was later in the race when he had more of a heat-soaked brake package and more worn tires, and then it was just a mental game of trying to wear him down.
Okay. You've been being a Porsche factory driver, you do a lot of racing with a lot of different teams. What are your plans for this year?
My main priority is here in the Pirelli World Challenge with Effort Racing. I'll also be doing the WEC, the World Endurance Championship. There's a couple races that conflict, but IMSA is also going to be part of my program in the long races, so Sebring, Petite, and Daytona, which we did last month.
You're running the full season and going for the championship in this series, correct?
That's right. The championship is the only goal.
Who do you think is going to be? I think the general consensus is that you're the favorite for the championship, but who do you think is going to be the guy to beat?
I think there's a few. There's a lot of really good, fresh, young talent, and then there's veterans like Johnny O'Connell. So I think the great thing about the Pirelli World Challenge is there's a diversity in the racetracks. So there's going to be weeks when it's our week, and there's going to be weeks when we're a 6th-place car. And the main thing is to keep your composure, keep putting points on the board. With 2 races every weekend, that means there's a lot of points up for grabs at the end of the year. So you need to be consistent, but it's also important for the motivation of my guys and my sponsors, and for my own career that we put this thing on the top of the box every once in a while. But over the long term, the way I was able to win the championship in 2011 was to score week in and week out and know when to play your cards.
I've heard a lot about performance balancing and how it affects the cars. Do you think that's going to play a role in how this championship plays out?
Hopefully not. I think that the ebb and flow of the different racetracks is going to highlight strengths and weaknesses from different manufacturers. There's a globalized view on the GT3 championship with SRO and FIA, and I think that their style so far is to leave it for quite a few races, and if there's an egregious amount of power or pace from one car, they may make a small adjustment, but they're not going to do this week in, week out adjustment, because it really takes the sporting element out of it, and all you're waiting for is the news of BOP adjustments rather than watching teams and drivers excel and really utilize their equipment.
Do you think it's going to be kind of the same tomorrow? Do you think it's going to be the same story, the same people running up front? Or do you think with track conditions changing, there might be some comers and goers, some people not really running as well, some people running better than they did today?
I expect Johnny O'Connell to be more of a factor tomorrow. I also think James Davison probably has a little bit of a bruised ego after his teammate showed him the way today. So I think those guys have something to show. It'll be certainly an interesting turn one. But everybody's got through the first race relatively unscathed, and I think that little bit of self-control might be less governed tomorrow. So it should be a wild race.
Best of luck, and best of luck for the rest of the season. Thank you for your time.
I want to thank SPG Motorsports for the space. We're actually in one of their bays. And I want to apologize for the noise. We're doing this in a thunderstorm at the moment, so if you hear rain, thunder, that's why. But we got my race car here. It's looking great, and thank you for watching.